Getting specifically to Algeria now, you brought up Belmadi earlier, and I would love to get your unfiltered opinion on his tenure as Algerian national team manager. We talked about Cisse. We both agree it was success. Belmadi was a little more up and down than Aliou Cisse was. Obviously winning an AFCON with you guys, but also getting grouped twice and failing to qualify for the World Cup. So how do you view Belmadi's reign in charge of Algeria, and how does the general public feel about his time in charge?
Yeah, it's a mixed bag. Belmadi when he came in, Algerian football was sick, to quote the Algerian Federation president. We hadn't qualified for the 2018 World Cup. We had crashed out in the group stages of the 2017 AFCON. We had cycled through, I think 6 managers in 2 years, something like that, and Federation president as well. So there was a huge amount of instability. It's similar to what Ghana's going through right now, where it's like people are trying, but it's just not working. And this is why I say like getting the right coach at the right time is a big deal. And Belmadi comes in, and again, I remember his first matches that he wins, against Benin, against the Gambia. He's drawing a match over here, he's winning 1-0 over here. But slowly but surely, all of a sudden you look up and you're 5 matches unbeaten. It's not 5 wins, but maybe 3 wins, 2 draws, and slowly but surely you're gaining a little bit of confidence. There's a team that's starting to form. And just before the AFCON, we felt like there might be something special happening, the 2019 AFCON. And as soon as they get on the pitch, they easily dispose of Kenya. And then they beat Senegal in the group stages. And that's when you're like, okay, this team they look good. Everybody immediately said it. I remember after the first or second match, everybody said, Algeria looks good. They look like they could win this thing if they continue to play the way they're playing. And they do. And after that, they're on a 35-match unbeaten streak. I think it was only beaten by Argentina. I think they set the record, Lionel Scaloni, just before the World Cup or something like that, before they lost to Saudi Arabia. That period was great. And I think it was great because you bring in a coach that's a former international. He's a French Algerian, like a lot of Algeria's best players are, like Riyad Mahrez. He's born in the Paris suburbs like Riyad Mahrez. He speaks French, but he also speaks Arabic, so he can relate to the players that are born in Algeria. He's somebody that could manage and understand the entire squad. And he also set them very well defensively. Tactically, it was interesting. We were playing this tight-knit 4-3-3 that could spring into counterattacks. Not too dissimilar from what Morocco was playing at the 2022 FIFA World Cup. And there was that kind of freshness and excitement from the fans to the players to the coach. I'll just give you an anecdote to maybe summarize why things flipped. Before the 2019 AFCON, we're having a training camp in Qatar, in Doha, like many African nations do. They go to the Middle East to prepare for the AFCON. There's a training session in the evening, and Riyad Mahrez is late. So everybody's on a team bus, and he's still in his hotel room. And coach is waiting, and all right, it's time to go to the stadium. And all the players are like, yeah, coach, wait. Mahrez is, he's still in the hotel room. And we can see him in the lobby. And coach is like, no, don't open the door. We're going to the stadium. And Mahrez ends up taking an Uber to the stadium, and he's not allowed to train with the rest of the team. The team's training, and he's sitting on the sideline watching. And the coach said, I almost felt bad for him. He's almost like, like a dejected little puppy or a kid because he wants to train and he can't. But that kind of discipline and that kind of, if he can discipline Mahrez, who plays at Manchester City, our best player, our captain, he can do it to anybody. That's what Belmadi brought initially. The first thing he said, I remember in his first press conference, was some players believe the national team belongs to them. And he ejected players like Nabil Bentaleb, former Tottenham, or Fawzi Goulam, former Napoli. That was like shocking. It was like it sent shockwaves through the system. You're like, okay, there's a coach here that's applying one law for everybody. Fast forward to the 2021 AFCON, which is played in 2022. So we're playing this match in the midst of COVID. You have to remember the Omicron strain just comes out. So we don't know what the heck this thing is. We just know it's highly contagious, and that AFCON was so weird. There was like all kinds of testing protocols and everybody was being very, very cautious. Sure enough, the team they've already arrived to Cameroon and they're in camp. And who isn't there? Riyad Mahrez. Why? Personal reasons. And it turns out that, again, I don't want to talk bad about the guy, but it turns out I think he was getting married to Taylor Ward or something like that. And it's like, I don't know if he was having a religious ceremony or something. And then what leaks out is even worse. All of a sudden on Snapchat, you see him in clubs in the UAE, again, in the middle of Omicron. And he's clubbing with a bunch of people and everything, right? And you're thinking, oh my God, because if he tests positive and he spreads this to the rest of the team, it was incredible that AFCON, how many players couldn't play. Comoros couldn't play with a goalkeeper because everybody was out due to injury or they had COVID, so that's like you're risking our entire AFCON. And he was never disciplined for this. And the coach was defending him. And that's when I started to see, the warm turn a little bit. And eventually what happens is two things: his failure to discipline and his failure to maintain that kind of equilibrium in the squad when managing. But second thing, tactically, he never changed his tactics throughout his tenure. We always played the same exact 4-3-3 with the same exact passing patterns, and it became too predictable. And eventually, in his final match in charge against Mauritania, when Mauritania beats us in the AFCON and eliminates us from a 24-team format where 16 teams get out of the group stages, the Mauritania coach essentially in a press conference predicted down to a T Algeria's passing patterns. He says if the ball goes to the center half, Issa Mandi. Usually he plays it to this defensive midfielder, and then they play this diagonal and so on. So his failure to refresh things and his failure to maintain that kind of discipline is eventually what led to his downfall. It was a mixed bag. Started off good, but ended up bad. And I think that's what Senegal was trying to avoid, is they don't want to let things get stale. They don't want to let things slide too far in the wrong direction.
Algeria is one of the craziest teams that I've followed recently, because if you pull up their Wikipedia page, right, and you look at like the results 2020 to 2024, there's barely any losses on there. And then you get
That's
a couple
true.
draws in there. I remember, was it Ethiopia you guys drew to in the group stage, or Madagascar, or
In the AFCON, we drew with Angola and then Burkina Faso. We lost to Mauritania. In the previous AFCON before that, we drew with Sierra Leone, lost to Equatorial Guinea to snap our 35-match unbeaten streak, and then lost to Cote d'Ivoire. It's true that, like, if you look at Belmadi's goal and transfer market and look at his coaching record, he was in charge for 60 matches. He lost 6. I think he was in charge for 66 matches and lost 6. But the matches that he lost were incredibly important. They knock you out of an AFCON or they knock you out of the World Cup.
that's why, going back to the Cisse conversation earlier, that's why I'm not having anybody saying like, oh, well, Cisse had a good squad. I mean, he's not getting grouped at
Yeah,
consecutive
yeah,
AFCONs.
yeah,
He's not
yeah.
failing to qualify for the World Cup with a stacked squad. Okay, so now you've had Vladimir Pekovic come in, and he was in charge of Switzerland for a while, and I actually thought he did a pretty good job with that team. I know it's still kind of early in his reign, but like pulse check after a handful of matches, how you feeling? You think you guys are
Yeah.
trending back in the right direction?
Look, pulse check. I checked in with some Bordeaux fans because he was at Switzerland and then he was at Bordeaux right before Algeria, and they were basically saying, you're gonna score a lot of goals and concede a lot of goals too, and that's exactly what we saw from his first 6 months in charge. Like play against Bolivia and win 3-2, and then we would tie South Africa 3-3, and we'd be just conceding stupid goals, but scoring a lot of goals as well. But what I've liked over the last 2 months, Algeria have looked really good. They've conceded 0 goals over the last 4 matches. Yes, we've played some poor opposition like Liberia. Even the kind of football that's being played, there's something there. Like I feel like we're in a good place, and all of a sudden, there were like 3 or 4 major questions that he had to sort of fix for being in charge of Algeria. It's who's going to be your central defensive pairing, who's going to be your defensive midfield. Can you get us to stop conceding goals on set pieces? These are things that everybody knew were problems, but there were no obvious solutions to. And slowly but surely, he's shoring up the defense. We haven't conceded on set pieces in a while. Still questions about the midfield, but maybe Ismail Ben Nasser is a solution when he returns from injury. So we're on the right track. I'm cautiously optimistic.
Would you consider Algeria top 5 African side right now?
That's a very good question. Senegal, Morocco. I'm going to have Egypt in front of us.
Your arch rival. You're prepared to do that. Cote d'Ivoire?
Cote d'Ivoire, definitely. Sorry, African champions. Apologies, Cote d'Ivoire. And then there are teams like DR Congo, South Africa. These teams, they're not better than Algeria on paper, but over the course of the last 24 months, they've had better results. So if I were like ranking them in a power ranking, I would have Algeria under them, but Algeria could definitely, leapfrog them if they continue to improve.
Okay, so maybe power ranking, they're outside of the top 5, but if we're going paper, starting 11, you
Yeah.
probably have them like 5th or 6th.
Yeah, I'd have them in the top 5, I think. If we're talking about on paper, yeah.